Thank you. Thank you.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Wednesday, January 6th. Thanks for joining us on this special live evening edition at 5:30. I'm Maya Trabulsi. A historic yet disruptive and deadly day on Capitol Hill as America's democracy is challenged in a way never seen in our history. Thousands of pro-Trump extremists stormed the steps of the Capitol after attending a speech by President Trump, who continued to call the election a fraud. This as Congress took up the process of certifying the Electoral College vote for Joe Biden. At one point, a woman was shot inside during the pandemonium. She later died. A similar but far more peaceful demonstration underway in our county. But we begin with what's been taking place in the nation's capital. More now from reporter Whitney Wild.
Pro-President Trump rioters breaching the halls of Congress.
They've essentially overtaken the front of the Capitol. This is an overwhelming number of people for the Capitol Police.
Triggering an armed standoff at the doors of the House floor. Protesters caught on camera taking the seat of the President of the Senate.
We've been hearing flashbangs every few minutes for the last hour.
Protesters have penetrated the Capitol. Tear gas has been deployed. Members now have masks that are in the Capitol.
Vice President Mike Pence rushed out of the Capitol building to safety. The entire House and Senate floors evacuated and lawmakers told to shelter in place.
This is despicable. This is not who we are as a country.
President Trump encouraged the protesters earlier Wednesday.
Right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
And later responded to the breach of the Capitol.
You have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order.
In Washington, Whitney Wild, KPBS News.
And Twitter has locked President Trump's account and is threatening to permanently suspend him. The website is demanding that he delete tweets that appeared to incite violence. President-elect Joe Biden spoke out against the violence, calling it an insurrection.
The world's watching. Like so many other Americans, I am genuinely shocked and saddened that our nation, so long the beacon of light and hope for democracy, has come to such a dark moment.
Officials have now declared the U.S. Capitol secure while protests continue in the streets outside. Lawmakers have said they would resume the constitutionally mandated Electoral College count to formalize President-elect Biden's win soon. And local reaction to the mayhem at the Capitol building has been swift and harsh. Our coverage continues with KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman.
Everybody stay down, get down.
It's terrible that it's come to this, but it's come to this. It wasn't our fault. This president has incited this. He's incited this riot.
Congressman Juan Vargas was across the Capitol in his office when violence first broke out. He described it as anarchy and told his staff to prepare for the worst as they sheltered in place, not knowing what could be coming.
It's unfortunate, but this is what it's come to. So we, in fact, took everything that we could off the walls that we could defend ourselves with, and we're ready to do that.
Newly elected Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs was one of the members selected to attend proceedings from the House gallery. She later reported that she and her staff were safe. Congressman Scott Peters also reported that he was safe. His Democratic colleague Mike Levin says our country is better than this.
We don't resort to violence, and that's what we saw today is domestic terrorism. The people that did this need to be held accountable.
The sole Republican from the county's delegation, Congressman Darrell Issa, took to social media, asking people to disperse from the Capitol today, condemning the violence and calling it, quote, totally inexcusable.
Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore.
I mean, he told the Proud Boys, come on down. I mean, this was not unexpected. This is exactly what the president wanted. It is ironic that these are supposedly the law and order people here protesting, and they're the ones causing anarchy.
Vargas believes that Trump supporters were treated differently by police today.
If the reality was, if these were Black Lives Matter protests, it would have cleared everyone the hell out of here.
Vargas says he will not be intimidated and says San Diegans will have their voices heard in D.C.
At the end of the day, people's vote will be respected, no matter what. You voted in San Diego, you voted in Imperial County, and your vote's going to count here, I promise you.
Vargas says the president is pouring gasoline on fiery tensions by continuing to falsely tell supporters the election was stolen. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
A similar pro-Trump demonstration taking place in San Diego, the gathering lasting for several hours before some of the protesters moved to a location in Santee. And that's where we find KPBS reporter Jacob Ayer for more on their message and whether things have remained calm. Jacob?
Yeah, now the protesters have moved out here to Santee at the corner of Cuyamaca Street and Mission Gorge Road. The protesters first started arriving around 4:30 and have been steadily growing and gathering here. There are currently around 75 to 100 protesters at the moment holding American and Trump 2020 flags. Earlier today, roughly 200 pro-Trump supporters gathered outside of the county administration building, echoing calls of a rigged election that were heard by rioters in the nation's capital. The protesters in San Diego first arrived in the late morning and peacefully assembled through the mid-afternoon. Protesters there similarly carried Trump 2020, American, and Don't Tread on Me Gadsden flags while lining the sidewalk on the ocean front of the county administration building. There has been verbal aggression here tonight displayed in Santee, but no serious violence has taken place yet. So far, there is no law enforcement at the scene. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
Thanks for that report, Jacob, and we are following all of the latest developments for you at kpbs.org. You're going to find that link to our breaking news blog on our homepage, kpbs.org. Another major political development taking shape right now. The state of Georgia has turned blue, turning control of the Senate over to the Democrats. Democratic challengers Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock have won both Senate seats in the state in a special runoff election.
I will serve all the people of the state. I will give everything I've got to ensuring that Georgia's interests are represented in the U.S. Senate.
It is a sacred trust, and it's one that I take very seriously, and I hope to honor that promise in the work that we will do in the days ahead.
The double wins end almost 2 decades in which Democrats have been shut out of statewide victories in Georgia. President-elect Joe Biden is the first Democratic presidential candidate to carry Georgia since 1992. We have important developments and updates concerning the pandemic tonight. San Diego County reported 37 more deaths from the coronavirus and 3,815 cases. There's also new information on the local rollout of vaccines and the current state of health regulation enforcement. KPBS reporter John Carroll says a change of leadership in the county may lead to stricter enforcement health regulations.
Good afternoon.
This was Supervisor Nathan Fletcher's first time leading a county news conference since being elected chair of the Board of Supervisors. He began talking about a subject on the minds of a lot of us right now. When can we get the vaccine? It's a question without an easy answer.
And as the county, we are working as an air traffic controller to try and coordinate and integrate and work together in order to ensure adequate distribution of the vaccines. Invariably, it is going to be a bumpy path.
Fletcher says right now we're in the Phase 1A of the Tier 1 portion of vaccine distribution, where healthcare workers and employees and residents of long-term care facilities are getting the vaccine. Fletcher says everyone should contact their healthcare provider for more information on when you can get the vaccine. Fletcher says the presence of the more easily transmissible UK variant, combined with the large number of people who ignored health warnings and traveled over the Christmas and New Year's holidays, means we're more than likely going to see our hospitals put under even more strain from an increase in COVID cases, and that leads to the county's effort to enforce health regulations.
As we have complaints come in, we evaluate those complaints, and we find that in general, about 90% of the entities come into compliance after an initial investigation or an initial contact. That is encouraging. Out of the 10% that don't, we issue a cease and desist letter. More than half of those who we issue a cease and desist or public health closure letter to do come into compliance after receiving that letter.
Fletcher says the remaining holdouts are then referred to law enforcement for a citation or to the city or district attorney for prosecution. Newly elected District 1 Supervisor Nora Vargas also talked about efforts to make sure the vaccine is distributed equitably, especially in her hard-hit district. Another change? Vargas says there will now be an effort to share critical vaccine and other COVID-related information in Spanish. John Carroll, KPBS News.
A motion for stricter COVID-19 restrictions on dining in Carlsbad has failed. The Carlsbad City Council listened to public comments for more than 3 hours before the motion failed to advance to a vote. Some restaurants have chosen to defy the stay-at-home order that went into effect last month and have stayed open for outdoor dining. A lawyer representing restaurants, gyms, and salons across the county calls it an act of peaceful protest. The proposed stricter enforcement included fines ranging from $100 to $500 per violation. Governor Gavin Newsom is proposing California issue its own stimulus checks for millions of low-income earners in the state. People making less than $30,000 a year would get $600 payments. The pool of eligible people includes some immigrants living in the country illegally who file taxes with the state. Roughly 4 million people would be eligible.
We are calling on some immediate action. We don't want to wait till July. We want some immediate actions to distribute $2.4 billion in what we call the Golden State stimulus for people that are eligible.
Newsom is also asking the legislature to extend a moratorium on evictions. He's asking lawmakers to approve the proposal quickly so people can be paid starting in February. The same day pro-Trump extremists stormed the U.S. Capitol, San Diego County leaders are vowing to counter the effects of historic racism. KPBS health reporter Taryn Mento says elected officials are pushing for a plan to combat long-standing health disparities highlighted by COVID-19.
County data shows Hispanic, Black, and Pacific Islander residents are hit harder by the coronavirus. But new Supervisor Nora Vargas says COVID-19 isn't the only pandemic.
And we must also collectively recognize and address that the pandemic of systemic racism is in San Diego County and in our nation.
Vargas and Supervisor Nathan Fletcher were joined by community leaders to declare racism a public health crisis. Tribal chairwoman of the Manzanita Band of the Kumeyaay Nation, Angela Elliott Santos, explains how the past unjust practices against the local indigenous community created poor health outcomes.
Today, diabetes runs rampant on our reservations. After having been free and proud, we were pinned up on land that wouldn't sustain one family out in the mountains, 4,200 feet up at Manzanita. So we see the lasting effects.
Vargas says a measure will go before the Board of Supervisors next Tuesday to help address past discriminatory policies. It directs staff to collect community input on existing county policies, better use data to identify gaps in programming, and incorporate an equity impact statement for any future recommendations before the board.
We're establishing a commitment to disrupt and dismantle oppressive systems, and we take the necessary steps to make sure that we remove barriers that prevent diversity and equity and inclusion.
If approved, staff would return in 90 days with a framework to move forward. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
The Louisville Police Department fired 2 more detectives involved in the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor. Taylor was killed by police in her apartment during a forced entry raid in March. Miles Cosgrove was fired for use of deadly force for firing 16 rounds into Taylor's home and failing to activate his body camera. Joshua James, who wrote the search warrant for the raid, was also terminated. None of the 3 officers in the raid were charged for killing Taylor. President-elect Joe Biden has reportedly selected Merrick Garland, a federal appeals court judge, as his attorney general. You may recall in 2016, Garland was nominated for the Supreme Court by President Obama. His appointment was rejected by Republicans, who held the seat open until President Trump was elected. Biden is expected to announce Garland's appointment tomorrow, along with other senior leaders of the department. A new law will provide emergency aid for homeless vets during the pandemic. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh says it comes as the VA announced more veterans have now died from COVID than died in combat during the last 2 wars.
The new law would temporarily loosen up rules for providing services and outreach to homeless veterans, including raising the amount the VA could pay landlords in places like pricey San Diego. Congressman Mike Levin is one of the bill's sponsors.
The monthly rent payments has not been adequate for a community like ours. We know that roughly a quarter of those VASH vouchers are going unused.
Those homeless vouchers were going unused in San Diego even before the pandemic. Price is one of the issues. Lack of outreach is another, Levin says.
They can choose to provide services that they could not before. They will have a lot more flexibility in terms of being able to even look at things like temporary housing of homeless veterans.
The new law comes as the VA says 6,772 patients have died from COVID-19, more than the number of troops who died in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. The recent defense bill also included language that would allow veterans with other than honorable discharges to qualify for homeless vouchers for the first time.
Post 9/11 veterans who have had addiction issues or are suffering from post-traumatic stress or TBI. And we have to be very mindful that these programs actually are designed to help the veterans who need the help, not just those who might check a box.
The legislation also requires the VA to study how to better serve the growing number of women veterans. Another provision would also expand services to help veterans get a job as they leave the service. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
A failure with a freezer nearly cost a hospital in Northern California a batch of COVID-19 vaccines. An outage left the refrigerator at a medical center in Mendocino County without power. By the time hospital officials realized it had malfunctioned, they had 2.5 hours to distribute the vaccines before they went bad. A call went out and the community responded by lining up around the block. 850 people were given the shots on a first-come, first-serve basis.
I got a call shortly after 1 o'clock. I got my vaccine at 1:30, and the vaccine expired at 2.
It's amazing how a time constraint can really deploy resources.
Roughly 1/10 of the population has now been vaccinated. Officials say none of the vaccine went to waste.
Well, things aren't changing a whole lot around here these days. We're still dry weather right into next week. Temperatures, though, they'll start to rise, so temperatures eventually getting about 5-10 degrees above average. And we'll have some locally gusty winds at times. Looks like the winds could be especially gusty, say, on Saturday. And along the coast, we still have some rough surf, and so these surf advisories continue right through Saturday. Let's go to our forecast for tonight. Episodes of clouds here near the coast. Oceanside 39, San Diego 46, Ramona down to freezing, down to 27 in Mount Laguna, Campo at 37. Forecast for tomorrow, well, looks pretty dry, mild, and lots of sunshine in the forecast, 42. There we go, Oceanside at 67, San Diego at 68. Ramona's at 73 and El Cajon at 76, quite comfortable. Borrego Springs 75 and Campo up to 70 degrees. As we take a look ahead, well, the pattern is familiar. We're dry here, storms deflected to the north. So from northern California to northwest, rain, snow, and wind. But we just get a few clouds from time to time and some shifting winds. So Thursday, partly sunny. Friday, more sunshine. Saturday, milder. Look at that, Sunday and Monday. Very nice. Some sunshine, temperatures near 70 degrees. Inland sections, quite comfortable. Just a little bit breezy. It's for the end of the week, into the weekend. But really nice over the weekend, low to mid 70s. Taking out the mountains, beautiful here too. Look at that. Every day we're in the low 60s. And in the deserts, a beautiful stretch of weather here, clouds and sun, but nice and comfortable. And for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
San Diego is known in the farming world for avocados, citrus groves, and its emerging wine industry. Now a new crop is starting to find a home in the region. Coffee. KPBS North County reporter Jacob Ayers says San Diego's coffee farmers include a Grammy Award-winning musician.
Coffee is typically grown in tropical regions and was previously considered a non-viable crop in the continental United States. But along the 76 freeway corridor in San Diego's North County, farmers are growing California coffee. Singer-songwriter Jason Mraz owns one of those farms in East Oceanside.
Hey, how you guys doing?
He has long grown avocados and other fruit on his land, but 5 years ago he became one of the first farmers in the region to plant coffee trees.
It's not easy to harvest. I mean, it could take you all day just to harvest one, because you go blind in the sunlight or the shade, or you're sticky with insects or the fruit. You've got your picking basket in here. You're trying to identify the dark colored cherries, which once they all start to turn red and purple, your eyes, it's kind of hard to remember which ones are ripe.
Mraz has 11 species of coffee on his 18-acre property and recently started selling his coffee beans commercially. The varieties of coffee fruit, or cherries as farmers call them, that grow on his 3,500 coffee trees are considered rare and often carry hefty price tags once roasted, especially a variety called geisha.
Whether it's through folklore or legendary that it's a brilliant bean, or just continued testing, drinking, and scoring high, it continues to just outperform all other coffees.
Mraz and all coffee growers across California get plant material, farming knowledge, and post-harvest processing from a company called Fringe Coffee. Fringe co-founder and CEO Jay Ruskey first started his journey into California coffee about 20 years ago. Over the past few years, the coffee industry has started to take notice of his plan.
I submitted some coffees to Coffee Review. We got like 27th in the world and got a lot of press on that. And then all of a sudden, I realized there was a chance that we can do something bigger.
Fringe Coffee now works with 67 farms across the state and 42 farms in San Diego County. California coffee cherries are known for their slow-growing process, which Ruskey says enhances their flavor profiles. He equates the growing process, blending methods, and market for California coffee to another product, California wine, which is produced in some of the same regions where coffee is now growing.
The farmers out there in Southern California, mainly like Santa Barbara, Ventura, and San Diego, were really looking for something new. And so Fringe Coffee and our coffee program was something that they thought they could adapt.
While getting a coffee farm started in California is a challenge, the Fringe team shares planting and care methods with farmers like Mraz.
In these aging avocado groves, which are all throughout San Diego, you can put rows of coffee between them. I don't want to make it sound like it's easy, but there is a symbiosis or a relativity between the coffee and the avo that does really well.
Bluetail Coffee Grove owner Kyle Rosa learned early that coffee growing isn't easy. He lost 37% of his crop during his first year due to unforeseen overnight temperatures that got too cold.
I have something new to worry about every stage. So can I get them in the ground? Yes. Will they grow? Yes. Will they produce cherries? Yes. Now the next stage is, will the cherries be of high quality? And that's my next worry and concern.
Rosa's farm lies between Vista and San Marcos. He has yet to sell his product commercially, but he is set to open a drinkery called Breakers Coffee and Wine in Del Mar this spring. The establishment hopes to feature San Diego coffee varieties and will offer coffee and wine tastings.
Whether you want the caffeine buzz or the alcohol buzz is up to you. But being able to explore new lands in terms of coffee and wine is what we're really pushing.
While California's coffee industry is still in its infancy, Mraz sees it continuing to grow, perhaps joining other prize industries in the state. He says there could even be a future in agrotourism for the North County.
Even if people just wanted to drive around and look at fruit trees, this is a unique place to do that, to see things that you may have never seen with your eyes before.
Perhaps one day soon, San Diegans will see something else new. California coffee on the menu of their local cafe. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
We have some breaking news. The woman who was shot and killed inside the U.S. Capitol during today's protests was from the San Diego area. Ashley Babbitt was a 14-year veteran who served 4 tours with the U.S. Air Force. For hours now, pro-Trump extremists have converged on the Capitol steps, at one time storming inside and bringing to a halt the planned confirming of the electoral vote, signalizing the Biden presidency. President Trump is calling for peace now, but continuing his baseless claims of election fraud. Calls are beginning to be made for his impeachment, including from local Democratic Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs. Capitol Police will remain on high alert to enforce a curfew put into place. And in San Diego, several hundred pro-Trump supporters held their own demonstration today at Waterfront Park. They, too, citing the election fraud claims made by the president. Some of the protesters then moved to a different location in Santee to continue their rally. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley. And by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.